Hi, everyone. This is Corey Hoynacke, the Curriculum Director at Summit ESC. I had the pleasure of coming and working with Akron Public Schools administration and along with Andrea Patt, our curriculum coordinator over here, the last week, and wanted to take an opportunity now to share that presentation with you so you can go back, reference it in the past, or if you weren't able to make it out last week to meet with us, be able to take a look at it this way. So we're going to talk a little bit now about professional growth plans and specifically how that is going to impact Akron Public Schools this year, and also just some good ideas for you moving forward. If you need to access this presentation at any time, you can use that tiny URL right there. Or if you have your phone up right now, feel free to click on and scan that QR code and be able to do that. But in addition, I'm going to add a link either shared out via email or even in the comments portion of this presentation for you to be able to access this at any time, because there are some good links in this and other information that you may want to go back and reference. So a few goals for this session, this presentation, just regarding PGPs, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the why. How are these going to be formatted? Why are we doing them? What's the purpose of these PGPs? And probably some good messages that you can share with your teaching staff as they start to think about how they are going to create these. Understanding how those PGPs should and could align to district and or building level goals. And then also to that OTES 2.0 rubric, which is important, right? The more that this can be aligned vertically from the building level goals to the district level goals to the OTES rubric, potentially to high quality student data, is going to provide really great feedback for your teaching staff. We're going to take a little bit of time to practice creating PGP goals, and then finally exploring, how could we monitor these goals, and keeping in mind a couple key words here. You want that to be intentional, and you want that monitoring to be purposeful. Now, Angela Harper, for those who were in the meeting, was able to share some of the requirements and dates, both for those staff that are on the off-year cycle and for the full-year cycle. For the purposes of this presentation, though, the most important thing for you to know is that your teachers and staff's professional growth plans are due on October 30th. So that provides you about 6 weeks here to go through this process, work on it, and potentially also, which has been shared as best practice for Akron Public Schools, be able to complete either a formal walkthrough or a holistic observation for each staff member prior to that time, so that you can then sit down with them and provide some feedback on what might want to be used on the growth plan. If you have any questions about timing requirements, any of those things, reach out to Angela Harper and she can absolutely help you out with that. So this is an opportunity for you just to think a little bit about how this went in the past. Hence, how did it go? So think about what you experienced last year with teacher PGPs and staff PGPs. Were there hiccups? Were there difficulties in the creation? Was the monitoring, did it go well? Were there struggles there also? And then what did you learn from that process? What were there things that either you would go back and say, man, I wish I would have changed that or tweaked that for this year, or things that you said that worked great, I'm going to continue to use that and continue to move forward here with that process. Maybe there's some refinement elements to it, but it was definitely a good experience. And then again, what are things that we can celebrate? Like I said, what went well last year, and where are there some general areas for growth? So if you're doing this on your own, you could jot down some ideas or take a second to just think about this a little bit and reflect on it. If you're doing this with a group and watching the video, by all means, please take a couple minutes here, pause the video, and just reflect on this. Okay, well, hopefully that was some good reflection that you were able to have regarding how this went in the past and things that maybe you've learned from, or in areas that you want to continue doing things. Some important reminders regarding the PGP as we look forward to this year. One, and I cannot stress this enough, it is a much more important part of the OTES 2.0 process. It's going to be revisited a few times throughout the year, and really just thinking about, excuse me, how are you using this through the process? How is this a tool for teachers to grow and administrators to grow and evaluators to grow. You're going to emphasize teacher practice as it relates to student growth, right? It's no longer the thought of, a gotcha, or even this is a check the box kind of procedure, right? This is thinking about, how am I growing as a teacher? How am I growing as an educator? And how is that being then shown through my students growing? We're going to try to touch base on this 3 times a year, once here in the fall, again around January and that mid-year check-in point, and finally at the end of the year when you're having that final evaluative meeting with your principal, and just to talk through, how is the growth plan going? Are you meeting the goals that you set? Do we need to tweak things? Do we need to change things? Okay, you want to align this as much as possible with those building 90-day plans. And then as an administrator, you want to provide support for your teacher's goals. What does this goal look like? What does this goal sound like? If I'm walking through the building, how do I know that staff is meeting or working on certain goals that they've set for themselves? Really, the biggest thing that I cannot stop harping upon is that you need to allow for continued communication and collaboration, right? This is about growth. It's about collaboration. Those are the 2 biggest words, catchphrases, whatever you want to say, through OTES 2.0. And that's not going to change in the professional growth plan element of this. Okay, so how do we approach this, right? Staff member comes to you and says, hey, I need to do a PGP this year. I don't know where to go. I don't want to do this. Can I just use something I've used in the past and sort of regurgitate old materials? Well, the answer to that is no, right? The approach for this is critical. It's all about mindset and the shift that we do with this, but it's way more than a check the box activity. And hey, look, admittedly so, in the past, I was, very busy as an administrator, and there were times where a staff member would say, here's my growth plan. Hey, great. Let's look it over real quick. Looks good. Put it in the file. We'll check it again in May, see how things went with it. You got to get away from that on this a little bit, which I know is challenging with all the other responsibilities that you have in your day, but really thinking about, how is this going to be a tool that I use and that my staff uses throughout the year to improve our teaching practices? So you're going to focus on dialogue with each other, data discussion. How is this impacting the teacher? How's it impacting the classroom? And really supporting them in any way, shape, or form that you can so that they can meet those goals. But again, as I said before, communication, collaboration, buy-in, those are key to making this a beneficial and productive part of the school year. So quick review here. Everybody has heard SMART goals before. Everybody knows about SMART goals, but it's, again, not the end all be all, but a recommended and good framework. And there's other ones out there that you can use, but we're going to stick with SMART goals for now, just because we know it's tried and true and it works. Is it specific? Is the goal specific enough? You want to think about it. Is it measurable? And that's always one that's tricky. How are you going to show that your students are showing growth? Or how are you going to show that you are you are attaining that goal that you have set for yourself? Is it attainable? Is it relevant to this school year? And again, it really focuses on this school year. And is it time-based? Is there a start? Is there a stop? That you are trying to see growth in that area. So let's take a moment and just look at the PGP form, just to familiarize you with it. I'm sure you've seen it before, and hopefully you've seen it before, but especially if you are new to the position, this might be kind of the first initiation you're getting into looking at this form. So as you're looking this over, and I'm not going to read to you exactly what it says, you want to think about a few things here. First off, and the next page that we'll go to is going to show you a few links that tie back to some of the things on this PGP. Again, good reason for you to be able to go back and access this PowerPoint or this slideshow later on. So first, thinking about these things here, right? Is it self-directed? Is it jointly developed? Or is it evaluator guided? And that's all going to be dependent on whether your teacher is coming in as accomplished, skilled, or developing. Self-directed, they're doing this on their own, coming to you maybe for a little bit of feedback. And in the end, you're saying, yep, sounds good. looks like a good goal. Let's work on that towards the year. If it needs to be tweaked, then please give the feedback to the staff member. Jointly developed, there's a little more conversation there, right? We're going to talk through whether or not this is a good goal for you. Is it something that maybe there's more bang for your buck, a power goal, if you will, in a different area. And then if that staff member is developing, really the administrator or the evaluator has the final say in what the goal should be for that person. And thinking through that. Still want to be collaborative. Obviously, it's not like if they are ineffective where they're on an improvement plan and that is coming straight from the administrator to say, this is where you need to work on. But really that should be a focus from the evaluator on that. So you have domains in this that are aligned to these goals that appear in the OTES 2.0 rubric. So I would recommend 1. You could check 2 here, but as you check more and more and more, that just dilutes the goal or goals that the teacher's developing. So really honing in on one of those domains, and that's going to come back to help you out later on in the year, especially if it's something like focus for learning, knowledge of students, lesson delivery, classroom environment, really any of these, you'll be able to see, hopefully, in that focused evaluation that you'll do later on in the year. So the first evaluation you do with someone on a full cycle is that holistic observation. And then later in the year, you'll have that focused observation where you really hone in on one of those domains and one of those components from the rubric. So the next part here, right? Goals or statements demonstrating performance on Ohio standards for the teaching profession. So in this portion, that's where, and you'll see a link in the next slide. If you haven't looked at them before, you want to think about what am I doing as a teacher? How am I going to grow this year? What do I want to focus on? And wording that in a way that, again, you going back to that SMART goal template is one of the ways that you can really develop a strong goal for yourself for the year. And then if you would like to, you can take a look at those standards for the teaching profession, because those will definitely help you out and maybe give a little bit more direction there as well. Action steps, resources to achieve those goals, right? That's the how, right? If this is the what I'm going to do, this is the how I'm going to do it. And then finally, how is that going to be measured later in the year? And the dates discussed can be filled in at a later date when you actually do discuss it. So that's kind of a quick run through of the PGP. And we're going to look at a few here that are already developed and some examples. So again, like I said, here are some of those links to those terms that are in the PGP, the standards for the teaching profession. Again, the OTES 2.0 rubric, if you'd like to go back and reference that so you can see the domains and the components. And then just a quick Google Doc that gives you some feedback and tips on writing SMART goals. Okay, so a couple points to remember, right? Autonomy on the PGP, as we discussed previously, is based on teacher ratings. Accomplished skills is a far more independent process than, say, if you are developing and certainly ineffective. Teachers can choose up to 2 areas of focus. It's going to depend on what you want to do there, and you have some freedom to decide between 1 or 2 goals. If this is a new teacher, if it's somebody that is really just getting started or going into the process, might not be an idea to just focus on 1 area and really dive deep into that goal and that domain within the rubric that they want to work on for the school year. Kind of thinking about that, it's as opposed to going in inch deep and a mile wide, we really try to dive deep into what that goal is and work on it throughout the year. These are based on those holistic ratings or recent evaluations, so nothing really different there. You could, and I emphasize this, incorporate high quality student data into the PGP, but that depends on the focus area, right? If you are choosing to focus your PGP on a professional goal that may be around better understanding your content area or exposing yourself to different professional development groups or things like that, then high quality student data may not be applicable in that case. But if you're looking at assessment or lesson delivery, then you may see high quality student data worked into the PGP focus area. So teachers are going to come up with action steps on how they want to implement those goals. And then again, another talking point, is your data going to be quantitative? Is it driven by those numbers, driven by student performance, especially if it's assessment related? Or is it going to be qualitative? Could it be a goal that revolves around communication with families or with peers and colleagues and your students? In which case you may be keeping a log in terms of who you've talked to and how you've spoken to them, and thinking about that qualitative aspect of it, or if it is the professional side and what you've been participating in and how you've grown. So there's no right or wrong answer here, right? No, there may be some wrong answers or poor answers, but that's where the evaluator's job is to help step in and really guide that staff member in terms of how they want to format and articulate this in their PGP. So let's look at a quick example here. Here's a PGP goal. You are looking at this here again, not saying this is perfect, not saying this is the end all be all, but just one example, right? By the end of the 21-22 school year, my students will show a year's growth in informational text standards through the integration of literacy instruction and assessment practices in social studies, right? So good goal. Maybe there's some measurable things in there that we want to add in, but again, it's pretty focused. I think it hits on a lot of the elements that we'd look for in a SMART goal, and it certainly gives a good direction to where this teacher's going in the school year. So I'll just pause here for a second to kind of take a look at some of the other things on this page. We have action steps. We see that there's quantitative measures for the teacher to be able to look at. You have data being collected throughout the year, classroom assessment data, and then really thinking about how it then aligns to the building or district goals. And in this district, for example, they're on the Ohio Improvement Plan. So it's a goal that all staff is aligned and engaging instruction to help their students, right? So they definitely want to think about how all this is aligning to any of those district and building goals. Okay. Again, if I'm moving too fast through some of this, that's the beauty of the video, right? You can stop, feel free to go back if you need to. Here's another one, right? It's always good to look at exemplars. It's also good to look at ones where maybe there's some room for growth. So I will plan and deliver effective instruction that reaches the individual learning needs of each student. Certainly on the right track. Maybe a little general, right? They've checked 2 domain areas. Okay, no problem there. Knowledge of students and lesson delivery. I think that those are both applicable. Administer multiple intelligences learning style assessments at the beginning of the year, and then keep a running record. Okay, not bad. But again, when you start with a very general goal, you're going to wind up with general action steps, and you're going to wind up with general measurable indicators, right? So you definitely want to think about how this should be worded, because that goal and statement is the crux of everything. If that's too general, you're going to have a really hard time coming up with some solid action steps and solid indicators that you can then go back to throughout the year. So here's a few examples of Akron Public School district and building goals. And these were submitted by real live Akron administrators and shared with me and with Andrea before we did this presentation. So again, in our conversations, a lot of people were talking about clarity and thinking about how the growth plan goals can tie into the concept of clarity and the work that Akron Public Schools have been doing with clarity. But you have some options here. And generally, those district and building goals and those 90-day plans are general enough that you'd be able to fit almost any sort of element within the domains of the OTES 2.0 rubric under that umbrella, which is the district and building goals. You definitely have some options and different directions you can go in with some of these things. Here's another example of a 90-day connection or a 90-day plan. This one goes back a couple years, but thinking about staff using formative and summative assessments, measuring student progress, right? Pretty broad, able to fit a lot of different things into the PGP based on this 90-day plan. You could go the professional route and talking about how You are learning new ways and new avenues to incorporate formative and summative assessment into your classroom. You could go the lesson delivery route where you're using formative and summative assessments. You can go the assessment route where you are literally assessing by using those formative and summative assessments. So a lot of different options here. And this was a nice general example of how the 90-day plan can work again as that umbrella for the individual PGP. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute here, and I would say pause the presentation after we get through this part. So a calibration activity, right? Think about your building goal, your 90-day plan, or your district goal. Then pick a component from that OTES 2.0 rubric, and I'll pull that up here in a second, and try to write a PGP goal that aligns with that component on the rubric and aligns with the district or building goal. So that PGP form is right here. Again, it's linked in the presentation if you'd like to go back and use that if you don't already have one. And again, here's that rubric. So you have that teacher performance evaluation rubric, and you're wanting to think about which domain am I going to focus on here? Is it focused for learning? Is it going to be knowledge of students? Is it going to be lesson delivery? It just goes on and on and on. Is it going to be classroom environment, assessment of student learning, or professional responsibilities? And then you could drill down even further if you'd like to look at some of these components. But that's what we're thinking about here as we go through and develop that PGP. So I'd say pause your video now. You can start it up whenever you do this, but really take some time here and take a second to see if you can come up with a PGP goal that would fall under the category of being a SMART goal that aligns to a 90-day plan or district level goal for this year, for the 21-22 school year, and that aligns to something on that OTES 2.0 rubric. So that's what you're going to be asking your staff to do. Okay, hopefully you feel like you came up with a pretty good goal there. So welcome back. And again, if you're doing this together, certainly I hope you took some time to work on that as a group and discuss through it a little bit. So some of the last parts of this that we wanted to talk through is just how do we monitor these goals, right? How are we going to look at these goals? The hardest part of every school year is that you're an administrator, and I know I've lived it. You have to evaluate your teachers, work with the students, work with the parents, having all your professional responsibilities. There is a lot going on. So how do you work smarter, not harder through some of this and really do spend some time to make this a purposeful and intentional and positive experience for your staff members? So just thinking about ways that you can use those walkthroughs. If you know going into a walkthrough what your teachers focus is for their PGP, then focus on that for their walkthrough, and hopefully you'll be able to generate some feedback from that. You know, keeping a good communication. A lot of this comes down to organization, right? Being able to have that opportunity from your staff members to send you information about what they may be doing. I know a lot of times teachers are humble. They don't want to get up on on the top of a mountain and toot their own horn necessarily, but it's okay for you to communicate like, hey, I'm going to need you, help me help you this year, right? And it's okay for them to send you an email or stop you in the hallway and say, hey, just so you know, I'm doing X, Y, and Z this week. Got some really cool things going on. Maybe you can stop by. And if you can't, then, hey, here's just a quick rundown. And then it's on you, jot that down somewhere. I would recommend one thing that I've used in the past, just using a Google folder for each staff member, that if you get any information from them, you can throw it into a Google Doc or a spreadsheet, or just having everything in one place for you to store it and look and go back to. Because at the end of the year, you're going to want to tie this into their growth plan, and you're also going to want to tie it into that overall evaluation that you're going to need to come up with for those staff members. So again, we had a lot of great discussion last week just about different ways that you can and should go about monitoring this throughout the year. But talk to your peers, right? Talk to the other administrators in the district, talk to people who have done it before, because you're surrounded by some fantastic fantastic professionals, and they really can help you out with this, especially if you're kind of struggling a little bit and feeling overwhelmed with how you could monitor this through the year. So disregard the first link there, right? That has already happened. That date has come past, but hopefully we were able to meet with a lot of people, and I think we did meet with a lot of people and talk through some of these things. But there will be more monthly meetings coming up, different elements of OTES 2.0 that we may be talking about, or just reflecting and sharing about how the process is going. So finally, if you need any additional help, do not hesitate to reach out. There is my contact information. Again, my name is Corey Hoynacke. I am the Summit ESC Curriculum Director, and there is my email. And then in addition, Andrea Patt, who worked with some of the administrators while we were in Akron last week, there is her name, her role, Summit ESC Curriculum Coordinator, and her email. So again, do not hesitate to reach out to either of us if you have any questions, you need any help. If a teacher comes to you and asks you something that you just don't know the answer to, don't lie to them. But it's okay to say, hey, I'll get back to you, and we're here to help you out. So do not hesitate, as I said. So that's all I have for this presentation. Again, thank you for taking some time to listen through this. Hopefully, it either reiterated what you already knew or gave you some new things to think about and look at with the professional growth plans. But have a great school year. Good luck, and hopefully we'll see you soon.